This is the Outlap F1 podcast featuring America's own Cody, Andy, and Deanna. Your one-stop shop for Formula One news, insights, race previews, and reviews. Join us on the Outlap. F1 2025 is upon us. We have survived the off season and we are back. Welcome on in. It's the Outlap F1 podcast. You've got Andy. And for the first time since he got married in the land down below, literally from the other side of the planet, he's back. Mr. Cody, how's it going, sir? I wish it felt more like spring out, but we had snow today.
Yeah, we're getting there slowly but surely. It's going to be nice in a couple of weeks. I just keep telling myself, almost there. Going to have some Formula One to tide us over. Yes, back from New Zealand now. I went and got married. It was awesome. Top of a mountain.
Look at that. He's got the ring on, folks. He's off the market officially. He's been off the market, but now he's really off the market.
I didn't have it on until like 5 minutes ago and was like, oh no. So yeah, I had to go throw it back on. But yeah, it was fantastic. Happily married now. To anyone listening who's interested. Actually, funny enough, our celebrant who wedded us is a huge Formula One fan. So if you end up listening to this, Philippa Thomas, awesome celebrant from New Zealand, thank you again. It was fantastic. And yeah, hope you end up listening.
Well, yeah, I mean, we always do need to grow the New Zealand arm of our audience. I can only think of one that usually pops up, and I usually know who he is. So if we can make it 2, we've doubled our productivity. Look at that.
You know what's really funny too is I always wondered why so many auto racing drivers seem to come out of New Zealand, because it's not a big place. There's not a ton of people who live there. And I always kind of wondered about that. And then after driving around there for almost 3 weeks, I realize now that New Zealand driving is made for building race car drivers. So it all makes sense now.
All right. Well, good. I mean, I want to hear more about that perspective, and we'll do so probably a little bit throughout the season. So if you see something that reminds you, I've seen that move in New Zealand, let us know. If you're new to the show, and you may be because it's the first time we've recorded in a while, you can find us on a lot of places. We are still on Twitter, X, whatever that's called. We are also on Instagram. We're on Discord a little bit, Reddit, YouTube, of course, at Outlap F1 Podcast is the handle for all of that. I'm also thinking about starting up an account on Blue Sky. And what we might end up doing is move some of our qualifying coverage that we do, where I live tweet the qualifying. I might just do that over on Blue Sky to try to move that up a little bit. But, and if you hear that and you think, oh, that's a great idea, do us a favor, leave us a comment or something on YouTube, say that you would like us to do that, because I want to go where the people are. And if that's where the folks are going, then that's where we're going to follow. But that's where we are right now. I mean, we're still on Twitter. We still do pass along news as it breaks and stuff like that. You can find us or email us whenever you'd like. Chat now at outlapf1.com. Outlap F1 Nation continues to be great. Thank you so much to the people who do continue to support this show. Now in its 7th season. It's been through many iterations, but we are now in season 7. This is the first episode. So thank you so much to Dean Warwick, from New Zealand, by the way. That's our one. Yuri Dulchester, Paul Weaver, Quentin Warden, Kevin Kelly, who's been amazing throughout the soft season, interacting, sending me stuff on Instagram. I love it. Regan Stanzik, Timothy Brown, and of course, Jonathan Scott. If you'd like to support our show, we will leave a link in our show notes to our Anchor page, $1 to $5. All goes into making the show a little bit better, makes us keep our technology up to date. Sometimes it gets a little annoying. This episode is kind of to test out and work out the kinks. As you can tell, I'm on my backup headphones because my Bluetooth doesn't seem to want to talk to my PC. So this is why we do this. This is why we go testing. We're going to talk about testing in a little bit as well. But yeah, feel free to, if you'd like to help support the show, feel free to do that. We would be most appreciative of that. So what happened since the checkered flag fell in Abu Dhabi and we got to see all that those lovely fireworks? really early in the morning, the start of what was, I think, a 24-hour day for me that day. But it's been a bit of an off season. Probably the biggest story that dominated most of the headlines up until recently, when we got to see cars and stuff, Lewis Hamilton in now Ferrari garb, indoctrinating himself at Ferrari. The tests that he did at Fiorano drew record crowds. The guy is a magnet. No doubt about that. He looked ultra dapper, I think, in his Italian garb. Thought he looked very, very sharp. And I love some of the symbolism in the photo. 7 windows and 1 door. Very, very interesting. You can read as much as you want into it. But Tony, what do you think of Lewis's offseason? And the guy looks really motivated.
Yeah, he looks like he's ready to rock. I don't know what anyone expected when you put together Formula One's most popular driver, one of the greatest of all time, and you put him with Formula One's most popular team. Of course, you're going to get so many people drawn to that. And he is someone who is very interested in fashion. So, of course, all of his photo ops to start his Ferrari career looked awesome. It kind of really hit home when you finally see those first images of him in the red Ferrari jumpsuit. You're like, holy shit, he is actually there. He's actually driving for Ferrari. He's in Italy. It was really cool to see. And it also really shows that he is still very motivated. This isn't anything like he's just trying to check off that last box for his career. Oh, I drove for Ferrari for a season or two. No, he looks like he's going in there very serious, very ready to compete with Charles Leclerc, trying to maximize what he can get out of the car, go for that championship, maybe number 8, who knows? So it is really good to see that he is back in it and ready to rumble.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy who you can tell a lot about his body language. And, I mean, if you've been following his career, you know when he's happy and you know when he's not, you know when he's fighting it. He looks like the reset was something that was definitely something that he needed personally. He's reunited some of his old staff with him. It looks like he's indoctrinated himself fully. I mean, he basically went to the Fiorano test track and kind of stayed there for like 2 weeks and learned all the systems of the car and all that other stuff. And we'll talk a little bit about how Ferrari looked in testing, and I think they looked pretty darn strong, if you ask me. So I think he's in it to win it. It could be as early as this season if the cards kind of fall right for them. And yeah, I mean, I think, like I've said before, if this goes according to plan and he does manage to win number 8 here, there will be hymns written in his honor that will be sung in Italian churches for years and years and years to come. So, absolutely. I'm sure there's someone in Italy writing what those are going to sound like at this point already. But yeah, I mean, I think if you're a Lewis Hamilton fan, I think you should be excited. There's a lot of good excitement around this season as it's already building. So yeah, he's just another one, but clearly was one that when he showed up and he was in red, it dominated like any social media you wanted. He had it.
That was all I saw for days was, oh my God, he's there. Oh my God, he went around the track in the old car. Oh my God, he's spun out. Oh my God, what does it mean?
Yeah, talking about trying to draw conclusions when he's not even on like actual Pirelli tires. Give him a break, would you? Jeez. But yeah, for sure. It is a superpower. He's also made most recently, he's on the cover of Time Magazine, which is a huge thing for him and a huge thing for Formula One, just in general, to have that kind of exposure going into the new season. Oh, by the way, Drive to Survive comes out in a couple days. I've actually heard that it's actually the initial reviews that I've read from folks who've gotten some advanced screenings have said it's pretty good. So that's a positive because the last couple of years have kind of left me frustrated with Drive to Survive. But let's hope that this one is good because last year was really fun. So
they had a little bit more to work with, I think, this time around than, oh my God, Max wins everything. So they got a little more material to make interesting.
Yeah, that's true. That's for sure. I think that helps. There's definitely some rivalries that you're going to see. I think Zach Brown, Christian Horner are going to be pretty spicy. The Flavio Briatore bit talking to Jack Doohan in the trailer that I saw that says, "I own every meter of your existence." Yeah, welcome back to Formula One, Flavio Briatore. And you're gonna wonder why I never liked him, but there you go. He's there for you, and if he gets Alpine going, I guess that's a good thing for them. So, other stuff that's kind of gone on non-Lewis Hamilton, the FIA continues to just, I guess, collapse in front of us. Mohammed Ben Sulayem is up for re-election this year. He's already got a challenger from one Susie Wolff. And wouldn't that be justified irony after the story that came out about supposedly Susie and Toto Wolff a couple years ago that didn't get any substantiation and had all 10 teams in the same 5 minutes all released the same tweet to refute it? Yeah. So, but one of the things he wants to do on the bad side is eliminate as much swearing in the world as he can find. Good fucking luck, Muhammad, is all I got to say to that. These are racing drivers. I think Gordon Ramsay at the F1 75 event said it best before they cut off his microphone. But Cody, any other thoughts on that?
Now, you took the words right out of my mouth with the good fucking luck. It's what they do. They're driving at the very limit, and they are very tense. We've seen it before. Drivers say all kinds of things that they don't even really mean when they're in the car. I don't know how you're going to be able to reel that in when they're in the car. And it seems like maybe that's kind of part of the direction they're going. It seems more what they really want to do is they don't want them swearing during press conferences or anything where they're in a more official capacity. And I can kind of understand that. I mean, the excitement side of that is if it didn't draw people in, they bleep out the radios when you're watching it on TV, and they don't even have to show that on TV if they really didn't want to. So it seems to be a little bit of this disconnect. It just doesn't make sense to me, though. Like, that's what people do in sports. Like, they get riled up, they get excited, they get bent out of shape at the littlest thing, and they swear. They're letting off steam.
I mean, it's not just in F1. It's in all sports. If you ever watch a professional American football game, if they don't have the parabolics, the COVID year enhanced that so much because there were no crowds. So all you heard was the trash talking, and it was every other syllable was, bleep this, bleep that, and everything else. That's just how people are. People are people, and part of the draw, I think, of the sport is the humanity of it. In spite of there's certainly a technological aspect to getting drawn into Formula One, but what I like is the people stories and the people's background and the overcoming of adversity. And sometimes that means that in a moment you say a bad word or two, and that to me is okay. And look, I get it if you don't want to go on your world feed, you've got a delay beeped in, or and looped into that. You can bleep it out. That should be fine. And God forbid. If a kid hears something that you're not necessarily comfortable hearing, God forbid that child's parent doesn't have a discussion with that kid and say, this is when you use this language and this is why. I wouldn't tell you to say it in that way, but if you did, keep it to yourself or something like that.
Yeah, it does seem to be getting a little over the top. It seems to remind me of the whole debacle with jewelry for drivers and the arguments for that when you knew why we were trying to prevent drivers from wearing jewelry and expressing themselves in that way. It's all just a little silly, and I feel like the FIA should have much bigger fish to fry than worrying if a driver says some bad word, under his breath in an interview or something like that. If you want to stop it from happening, keep it from happening in something really official, like the press conference where they do all the drivers at the beginning of the weekend, fine. That makes sense to me. If you're doing a one-on-one interview with the driver after the race, when they're all hyped up and coming down from that, and they accidentally let one slip, like, why are you so worried? There's way bigger problems that the FIA has to deal with.
Right. Let's make sure the cars are safe. Let's make sure the barriers and stuff are where they're supposed to be. Let's make sure that the rules are actually enforced universally and consistently across the board. That would be a great place to start. Let's make sure that our race directors aren't overworked to the point of exhaustion, to the point that you had to hire 2 of them, one of whom you also fired. yeah, there's just a whole lot of things that I think the FIA should be looking at that they're not. So we'll see where this goes. I'm sure it's gonna pop up. That's why I wanted to put it in here, because it's gonna be a story. Probably at some point, someone's gonna say something, and we're gonna see where it is. Because what they put out was these sanctions. Like they even wanted to like start docking points and stuff like that. And I'm like,
Yeah,
that's
the reprimands
crazy.
are crazy.
Yeah. But anyway, moving right fucking along, the other story that's probably going to dominate at least the first part of the season, and then it's going to quickly switch at the Spanish GP. The whole Flexi Wing saga took a couple of kind of unexpected turns. One, they first said, look, all the Flexi Wings are going to be okay. These are our regs. Have at it, pretty much. Then they came out and said, well, we're going to we will much more strictly enforce these new rules that we've learned from looking at all of the tape that we've got on what these wings are doing, but we're only going to do it after the Spanish GP. So we're going to start the season kind of with one set of rules regarding these wings, and then in the middle of the season, we're going to quickly pivot to another set of rules. So varying reports have been out there as to who was behind it. I've heard that, it was somehow a backhanded McLaren thing, that they wanted to do it to, prove to everybody that they already figured out the technology, and this way nobody else could do it. I've heard it be a Red Bull theory, that they were the ones wanting it because they were the ones obviously that raised the issue, I think, at the US GP and after Azerbaijan. It looks like for the most part, all the teams have now kind of gone down a path. So at least they're going to start the season with some form of flex wing, and then we're going to change mid-season, I guess. So, Cody, what's your thought on this?
It does seem a little silly to me to go a third of the season knowing that you're going to clamp down on this later on, but still saying, well, if you've got it, it counts for now for the first 8 races. It would make much more sense to me where you either say, look, this is the regulations that we've had. If anyone's figured out how to make this work and still stay within the bounds of the regulations we've set, good on you. We've seen that happen in the past, and all the other teams have to develop to catch up, or that they just ban it for the whole season. We've seen that too, where some team comes up with something that gives them an edge that's kind of right on the cusp of, being illegal, and the FIA will say, yeah, that's okay for now. We're going to let it ride out this season, and then next year it's going to be completely banned. So yeah, it does seem weird that right up here at the front of the season, we're saying, yes, one set of rules will apply for the first third of the season, and another set of rules will apply for the second 2/3. I would believe at most if it ended up being that Red Bull was the one who threw a fit over this, because they seem to have, over the last few seasons, had the best success with the car before teams started figuring out how to use the Flexi Wings to their advantage, like McLaren. And they probably stand to benefit the most from those Flexi Wings going away, because that might put them back at the front. But they also have to be frustrated, and you had mentioned this before we started, that because it's going to be legal for the first 8 races, well, then they have to try to keep up. So they have to develop some kind of Flexi Wing system of their own to try to keep up with other teams that have that. But it's only going to be functional for 8 races, and then you're going to throw that in the bin along with all the money that you spent developing it.
So, and all that goes against your cost cap. So you have to spend it. It almost feels like a forced spend at that point. So yeah, and that's kind of what's led to a lot. I've read a lot of different theories as to where this maybe came from, but it looks, this is what we got. This is how we're going to do it. It looks like we're going to have a race to Spain and then a race post Spain. And I think the first Grand Prix after Spain is going to be the fascinating one, because we're going to see, does it change any of the pecking order significantly? And if so, how?
Yeah, it will be very interesting to see how that plays out. And if it changes from McLaren winning almost every race to Red Bull winning almost every race from that changing, I doubt we would see anything quite so extreme just from that little regulation tweak. I really think McLaren has the card nailed in at this point. But if we were to see something like that happen, you bet everyone, fans, drivers, teams, they're all going to be up in arms about why did you let this happen this way?
Right. Yeah, nobody wants to see a championship that looks one way for a third of the season, only then to severely pivot based on an artificial rule change that catches somebody out. I don't think that's necessarily the spirit. The idea is you should be free to design within the set of rules that you have. And if you found an exploit, I always have said that that's good on you. I was not a proponent for banning DAS, but when Mercedes did it. But the reason that they did it was because there was no cost cap, and they didn't want to create a spending war for everybody to develop a DAS system to then only have to scrap it a couple years later. So this is kind of the same thing, but now they're doing it because they have the safety net of the cost cap. Well, they can only spend so much. It's just going to be kind of where they spend it. So you're definitely going to want to see, I think, early on, maybe even teams, especially ones that are maybe up against the cost cap, being a little conservative in how they fight wheel to wheel and stuff like that because they can't afford a wreck. Mm-hmm. So something to keep our eyes on as we move into this season for sure. Okay, well, we also had for the very first time, normally early February, I used to call it some of the best 2 weeks of the year because you kind of get a different present every day, especially with 10 different teams. You get these car reveals that some were very ornate, some were literally a rendering, and some were, hey, here's our car. Take a picture if you want, type of thing. Like Haas would send out a rendering and say, this is our car reveal. And that's about it. And here are the drivers in race suits. But what FOM decided to do was try to get everybody together and have kind of a big event. They sold out the O2 Arena, and good on them for doing that. It was an event that it was not exactly well timed. I think it was a Tuesday afternoon at like 2:00. So I was trying desperately to watch it live, but I kind of realized early on, this is not going to happen. So, because I was kind of busy, doing my day job. So I watched it kind of on the rebound after I got home. But I did watch the whole thing. It was a bit long. I thought 2 hours was actually a little bit longer than I would have expected. And they did go through all 10 teams, which is fine. What they did was they gave each team, I think, 7 minutes on the stage, and they could basically do whatever they wanted to do. Like the Kick Sauber brought out all of these drummers with neon green, drumsticks and stuff like that. That was kind of cool. McLaren brought out all of their championship-winning cars and then brought out the MCL 38 at the end, which, by the way, had the same exact livery that it had last year. I'm a little sore about that. I guess if you're trying to just recycle your team kit from last year and change the blue to gray, you win. Yeah, not thrilled about that, but I get why, but it just screams of we didn't want to spend the money, but whatever. The Red Bull still looks like a Red Bull. Shocking, I know. There was what I would call the Ferrari white stripe of death, the big HP along the fuel tank. Other than that, I think the car looks pretty sharp, but that was a bit of a faux pas. I thought the two cars that looked probably the best were probably going to be in the back of the field. The V-Carb I thought looked pretty good. And I thought Haas's liver was actually, fairly sharp. But not a whole lot of big changes amongst any of the teams. Like the Aston Martin still looks like an Aston Martin. The black is a little bit higher than the green this year, but it's the exact same shade of green. So for a big livery reveal event, I didn't feel like at least that aspect kind of lived up to billing. But Cody, what were your thoughts?
I thought it was, interesting for a one-time out type thing. They said that they were doing this for the 75th anniversary of F1, and it was a cool gimmick, I guess, for one time out. It was a little outdone by the fact that there were some teams that ended up taking their cars out on the track in like special liveries right before the event. So it was like, oh, well, you're actually seeing the car, you're just not seeing the livery. So that was a little bit of an odd thing to see. I would prefer, I guess, as far as the show goes, I would prefer it to go back to the way it was before, where each team kind of does it when they feel like it leading in. You get a little bit each time. teams aren't restricted to 7 minutes. They can take their time and do things how they want to do. Even if they want to do it like Haas does it, where it's just a picture and a wave, they don't need to actually have a car there. I think that overall works better. There were some things that they did that did seem a little weird and gimmicky, where they were like making fun of teams and drivers there. They had like a comedian and all that stuff. It was
the host, I thought he was funny, but at the same time it was also a little bit cringe. Like, wow, you went there that fast. That was quick. Like, we were 5 minutes in, and we're talking about George Russell and from Max Verstappen and the Abu Dhabi beef, and I'm like, well, at least he's well read. And I'm like, did teams get a look at this script before they did it? But there definitely were some barbs thrown and some awkward moments. That part I thought kind of reminded me, like, sometimes when you watch these year end, like the Auto Sport Awards, or sometimes even at the FIA Gala, especially with like Kimi Räikkönen's there and is plastered to the wind like he's been a couple times. It can be kind of a funny, endearing moment, but it kind of felt a little forced. And they're showing the pan into Max, and Max is just kind of sitting there, and he didn't realize he was going to be on camera, and then so he was kind of laughing at it, but not really. And then Christian Horner goes out and gets dramatically booed, and I can understand why in Britain he's going to get booed. I get it. The guy has a history, and not all of it's great. So, but he also should know that, and should not act like it was a big deal that people who paid their own money expressed an opinion about him. And that's basically all it was. So, yeah, I don't think it worked in total. I don't know that it's something that I would want to see it's certainly not something I would want to see every year. Because it felt a lot like kind of those Las Vegas opening ceremonies where people are telling the drivers where to stand, and then they put them all in constructor order at the end, and they're all standing by the car, and they're just kind of looking around at each other like, hey, what are we doing here?
Yep.
Type of thing. So
do we really have to be here and doing this?
Yeah. I mean, the one traditional launch that I actually got the most out of, believe it or not, was the Williams one, because and they went full car launch. They did the thing that even Fred Vasseur said he's never going to do again, which was launch the car for the first time on live television. That is a huge, and they pulled it off. And then they even went one step farther and had the Sainz radio to the garage being broadcast on his outlap. So if there was some like big warning light that pops up, I mean, could you just imagine in that type of situation, Carlos Sainz goes, guys, why is that flashing red? That shouldn't be doing that. But luckily it didn't happen. And Fred Vasseur said he's never doing that again. They did the same thing a couple of years ago with a launch at Fiorano. And Fred Vasseur came back to that and said, it almost gave me a heart attack. I will never do that again on live television because it's way too much. So that was actually the car launch I got the most out of. McLaren just showed up at Silverstone one day and said, hi, we're here. Here's the car. Didn't see that coming. No, there was no leakage of that date that I read anywhere. And then all of a sudden, blam, there it was. We've obviously seen the Ferraris do their test runs at Fiorano. But yeah, other than that, I think a lot of the teams just were kind of mooted because they all kind of wanted to put their energy into this. Was the first time I ever saw a Haas hype video in their history. So that was interesting. But yeah, I don't know that it's something that I would want to do every year. But for the 75-year thing, I think it was fine. Is kind of where I kind of got to the end of it. I'm like, it's a little long, but it was overall fine.
Far as I just want to touch on the liveries themselves again, really quick. As far as the liveries go, I think that the V-Carb livery is the best looking, and I was so excited because I didn't watch the event live. The first reveals of the liveries that I saw was pretty much via Reddit, and I saw that car get revealed, and in the post they had said RB, so I was thinking Red Bull. So I see that car and I'm like, holy shit, they changed the Red Bull livery. And I was so excited because I thought it looked so cool. And it actually had like the Red Bull logos, in proper colors up at the front. So I thought, man, this is the real deal. And then I read into it a little bit more and it's like, no, Racing Bulls. I was like, son of a bitch. What does the Red Bull look like? Oh, the same as every other year. Of course.
Yeah, right. And the reasoning behind the McLaren thing, why they just did the same livery, it's a harken back to like their 2008 to 2012, where they basically ran the same exact livery and they were winning races and potentially winning championships. That's the excuse they give you for doing that. I would have loved to have seen that camel livery actually be what they would have ran, or some more refined version of it, because I thought that actually looked pretty darn cool when they did the shakedown. But they clearly, you look at the changes in the team kit, and it's really not all that different. Like, it's literally the same hat. The blue stripe is replaced with a silver stripe. So, fine. I mean, Lord knows I have enough McLaren hats. I probably don't need another one. I may have to wait like all the way till COTA before I pick one up, but I do have a bit of sour grapes from the McLaren store at the current moment, but I'm not going to lambast them on the air here, but they know what they did.
For the best.
Yeah, well, the good news is I got my money back. That's about the only good thing. Whatever. Anyway, so we're going to actually take a quick break. We're going to come back, and then we're going to get into the test, because we actually have now seen the cars on the track. What did the test reveal? What did we learn? What do we still want to know? And then we're going to take a bit of a stab at some basic predictions. Who we're going to think is going to win the drivers, who we're going to think is going to win the constructors, who's going to be our biggest positive surprise, and who's going to be our biggest disappointment. So come on back, and we'll hop into it.
You are listening to the Outlap F1 podcast, and we'll be right back after this quick pit stop. Grab your flu powder, broomstick, or apparate to your favorite audio streaming service to join the discussion on Hogwarts, a podcast, where Dan and his friends have in-depth chapter-by-chapter breakdowns of each Harry Potter novel. Join the group as they dive into the magical world and discuss plot points, analyze character development, and occasionally go off the rails. Whether you're a muggle who's new to the series or a pure-blood wizard who won't need a remember-all, Hogwarts, a podcast, brings everyone to the Great Hall for a magical discussion. Hogwarts, a podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, welcome back in. This is season 7. Oh my God, it just sounds so weird to say that, but this is our first episode of season 7. This is the Outlap F1 podcast. You've got Cody, and you've got Andy. I'm Andy. I'm along with Cody tonight, and we're going to hop into this part of the F1 program. 1 second here. We went... If you didn't know, F1 went testing at Bahrain over the course of the last week for the 3-day preseason test. Next year, I think, is going to be 6 or maybe even 9 days. I think next year, Circuit de Catalunya is going to be back on the testing calendar, because these 2026 cars are going to be so different that they need more time to shake them all down, figure out how everything works. So in terms of big overall themes, I think from the tests, one, the reliability across the board was absolutely amazing. The days of engines blowing up and giving out, you might as well enjoy this now in 2025, because that's going to come back, I have a funny feeling, in 2026. But nobody had, other than like a water pressure leak or something like that, the reliability was just through the roof. So teams could pretty much kind of do what they want. In fact, the only thing that really broke was the racetrack. Day one, we literally saw what happens during an F1 session when the lights go out. Literally. Problem with the Bahraini power grid meant all the lights in the garages all went dark, and all the floodlights all went dark. And then we got to watch what happens when a stadium or a big venue like the Bahrain circuit has to power itself back up, even when the power comes back on. Not everything comes on right away. So you see some lights come on and they get up to temperature, and then more lights come on. The whole thing took about 2 hours, and they actually ended up extending the day one session because of it. But I think overall reliability well in the team's favor. I think these teams are going to be able to do pretty much whatever they want with the cars and probably not break them unless they crash them. The top 4 from last year are still going to be your top 4 this year. The order may be a bit different, and I think there are some comers and some teams that are slightly a little bit on the back foot in that top 4. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. The midfield is still, I think, pretty strong. Williams, for a team that literally said in their car reveal, in their launch event, we're focused on 2026. Don't tell that to Carlos Sainz, because Carlos Sainz went out and not only set the fastest time of the overall test, but was the number 1 of the headline times on 2 of the 3 days. Now, does that mean Williams is really going to be challenging for podiums? Maybe not, but still, that team has definitely made a step. The James Vowles effect definitely appears to be real. And if they could put this into a 2025 makeshift car, only imagine what they're actually doing when they're putting all their resources together for 2026. So I think there's some bright times ahead for that team. In terms of teams that I thought struggled a little bit, I wouldn't want to be in the Kick Sauber. Nico Hülkenberg is probably regretting his move over there. And poor Gabriel Bortoleto, who had such a great F2 season, is going to have pretty a long and hard road to hoe this first part of this year, because Kick Sauber definitely looked like it's a very narrow operating window if there is one, and very, very tricky car to drive. I also wouldn't want to be Aston Martin. Now, we know that Adrian Newey literally started there a couple days ago, and maybe they're going to have him look at the 2025 stuff and say, can you do anything with this? But he's there really to do 2026. Now, granted, they've even built him a little alcove at the factory where if he wants to spend the night, they're more than willing to have him do that. But I think the genius of Adrian Newey might not be able to rescue the 2025 car, because that looked pretty rough. Lance Stroll was sick throughout some of it, so Fernando Alonso had to do some extra testing. But that's a team that definitely looks a little bit on the back foot, and said I've seen them ranked as low as 9th in some lists. So yikes for Aston Martin. Let me put it to you this way. In terms of McLaren, I am holding back my excitement. I didn't want that to be the headline story, but all I saw, the headline times weren't there, but that Lando run, the long run on day 2, was a thing. And watching it on the timing, and watching also Kimi Antonelli doing one and Charles Leclerc doing one in the Ferrari at the same time, you could see the deltas. Do I think it's 31 seconds? No. I think that was conditions. It was a lot cooler at the Bahrain track than it generally was, but the gaps might be real. That's the takeaway that I take there. Piastri actually did a long run on day 3, even though he was a few seconds slower than Lando's long run pace. I think that was more due to the track temperature being higher. Those conditions led to some slower lap times. But I think overall they're maintaining the gap, at least early. So it looks like McLaren are the early season dog to be chased, at least early on. And then the question that I have, where do Max and Red Bull fit into this? We know that they're definitely going to be in the top 4. We know Max is good for 2 to 3 tenths a lap by himself, but can that car maintain its tires long enough to keep the stint length going? I think that's the big question for Red Bull at this point. So those were my main takeaways. Cody, what you got?
I agree with just about everything that you said, really. As far as the Red Bull thing goes, I'm going to be frank with you. I want to see Max Verstappen become a 5-time consecutive world champion. I think that would be the coolest shit. And would be really cool for him to cap off for this entire aerodynamic era, which really has actually been pretty short if you think about it compared to a lot of other
Very true.
regulation eras. It's only been like, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4 years with these cars. So I want to see him do it. And I was really hoping we would come into this testing and they would look a lot better. They give me some warm fuzzies, but that is not the case. They showed up with what visually looks like the same car as last year, despite the fact that they say that they have made quite a few changes. And it looks like it still has, and the team admits to having, a lot of the same issues as last year's car, where, yes, maybe the potential for it is very high, but they're having a really hard time getting the car into the operating window that it needs to be in to actually show that potential. And it looks like McLaren and Ferrari And even now, Mercedes are having an easier time getting their cars into those optimal windows. Mercedes looks like they've taken a step up. McLaren looks like they're coming into this year the same way that they left last year, which is with what appears to be the best car. What I am happy about, though, and hopeful for the season here, is it looks like there isn't a true runaway favorite here. Yes, McLaren looks to be the favorite from testing, but there's a lot of other teams that are right there. Like, a lot of people that I've been seeing online have been saying that Red Bull looks like the fourth best car. And I would say that even with the fourth best car, Max Verstappen could probably get some podiums and wins. So
yeah, I dubbed that
one.
Max Factor. I just call that the Max Factor because not only is it a mascara, it's apparently a really good racing driver because, he just brings that extra gear. Hamilton has that extra gear. Alonso brings you that extra gear. Those are proven. What I don't know is there now a Lando factor? Is it Lando? Is it the car? Is it a combination of both? I would definitely say it looked like Lando had a better test than Oscar did, but they also gave Lando the afternoon sessions for 2 of the 3 days. So I don't really know where that sits. Of all the teams, I think McLaren have the probably the most in terms of driver rivalry that could be bubbling under the surface, followed probably really closely by Ferrari rather, because I think
Mercedes
Hamilton,
too, for that matter.
Well, and Kimi Antonelli has come in and really didn't put a foot wrong in the test, from what I saw, other than he had some lockups, but who didn't go into that turn 10? It was so cold. It was so unseasonably cold. And it rained for 2 hours in Bahrain on day 2. It's a desert and they got rain. It rains 3 days a year, and damn if Formula One didn't pick one of them. So look at that. So I don't know what you, and the other thing about this track, I don't think it's the best test track. I actually think Circuit de Catalunya is the better indicator of a running order because this track is so kind of unique in the way, one, it's abrasive as hell. There were no C5 runs. 3 days of testing, the only testing you get all year, nobody ran a C5 tire. Carlos Sainz ran one set of C4s just at the headline time, I think on the 3rd day, and that was all you saw, the C4 tires. You saw more running from the Haas's who brought intermediate tires than anybody else because of the rain. So it's not the best indicator of as a test track. But as a McLaren fan, like I am, I'm really excited because this was always their worst track. For how many years I used to say, get Bahrain, get it out of their system, and move on to the next ones where they might be better. Well, if they're good here, let's hope they're good somewhere else. And if this is real, they got to come out and they got to parlay the advantage as much as they can while it's there, because I think you're 1 or 2 updates away from Ferrari and Mercedes being right on their tail. And then you're maybe a Red Bull upgrade package away from them being right back in the mix too. Because if they understand what the problem is, they've been here before, and they fixed it last year. And Max ended up winning races when everybody had, for the most part, kind of written him off, even though he was going to be the world champ last year. So there is still plenty and all to play for. Put that against the backdrop of when do you stop development on the 2025 car and move over to 2026? That's going to be a story that's going to be out throughout the whole year. And, your midfield battle between Alpine and Williams, boy, did they came out of nowhere. Like nobody expected that. And here they are setting really competitive times. They're still using last year's tub. They literally glued the car back together and updated it and put an upgrade package on last year, and it's working for them. So I love the can-do spirit of that team. This season's going to be a fun one. That's what the test tells me. The season is going to be fun. There's going to be a lot of stories.
It is going to be very fun. It's going to be fun for most of the drivers. You mentioned Fernando Alonso before. I have to wonder if he's having some PTSD flashbacks to his McLaren days, because it appears that, like you were saying, Sauber and Aston Martin, they're putting all of their eggs into the 2026 basket. I think that behind closed doors, they've more or less written off these seasons, and that's going to really suck for drivers like Fernando Alonso, who really don't have that many more years left as a driver, and they got to now drive around what is probably going to be mostly a shit can for a whole season, and hope that next year is better, I guess.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, the good news is Fernando can go cry on Adrian Newey's shoulder. I just don't know if Adrian Newey will be listening. That's kind of the question that I have there. Yeah, they definitely were struggling. The Kick Saubers were definitely struggling. The V-Carbs look interesting. Like, they can probably punch above their weight a little bit. It's interesting that Yuki Tsunoda also fired his entire management team right before the test started. Really? Citing that he was very, very upset that he did not get the Red Bull seat as he had sort of planned out for himself. So I don't know that he will be in the Red Bull family much beyond this year. He's probably going to see out the rest of his contract and then try to skedaddle. And so that's going to be an interesting dynamic, because if he's just riding for himself, I don't think he's going to try to do anything to help Isaac Hadjar get on par with the car. So what does that do to that team? The Haas's kind of get it incomplete because all they did was run race runs, but the problem the Haas's have is bodywork keeps coming off the car. They had more side pod or, parts of the side of the car rip off in the middle of the third day of the test, and, caused a brief stoppage and, all that. So if they can nail down and keep the car literally in one piece, they might be good. But we're going to have to see, because they did not show basically anything in testing. I think Io Kodamatsu said that they were trying to work out inefficiencies in their operations, meaning, so they focused all pretty much on race runs. They didn't really do any qualifying time. So Ollie Behrman, we didn't really get a chance to see how he's coming together with the car. Esteban Ocon, it still looks like Esteban Ocon to me, but maybe, they can show better. But, it's really going to be, you're not going to know anything until Saturday morning for us when they do qualifying in Melbourne. That's when finally they'll turn it up to 9 and see what we really got, and, and where are we in the pecking order. So I've seen a lot of different pecking orders. If I was to say one right now, at least top 5, I would put McLaren 1A, or 2A and 2B would be Ferrari and Mercedes. 3 would be Red Bull, where they are right now. 4, I would say, is probably Alpine, and then 5 would be Williams. That's kind of my early pecking order. I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
No,
as the cat joins the show.
Yep. My pecking order is pretty much the same. I think that McLaren is the favorite right now, and I think they are strong enough that it is pretty much everyone's opinion coming out of testing that they are the favorite. But as I said, it's not by a lot. There's plenty of room for other teams to catch up to them. Ferrari maybe doesn't look quite as strong as I hoped, considering that they were right there for the Constructors' Championship last year. But they still got plenty of space to get there, and they got 2 of the best drivers around. So if they can, they will. But yeah, I would say that it's probably really close between Ferrari and Mercedes for those next 2 spots. And then, hate to say it, Red Bull following them up for now. And then, yeah, can you believe that Alpine looks that much better after how they started last year? Like, they're solidly in the midfield now, as opposed to being the worst car on the grid by far. And that was really saying something, because we had Sauber, or Kick Sauber, whatever the hell. But
the bright green car in the back.
Yes, which I think we're going to see a lot more of them at the back again this year, sadly.
Yeah, so I mean, the tests always reveal something, but I always think they always lead to more questions. So it's definitely going to be appointment television all of 2025. And if you're in the U.S. and you like the ESPN coverage, you might as well enjoy it while you have it, because the word that I am hearing is that ESPN is not keen to renew their F1 deal, and we may end up with either another network or potentially a streaming service, i.e. a Netflix, taking over the rights to F1 next year. My thought on that is, as long as you don't put commercials on in the middle of the race, I will live with it. 2, don't futz around with F1 TV. That thing finally works.
God, I love F1
It's
TV.
where it needs to be. Don't touch it. Please don't touch it. If you want to negotiate your streaming rights somewhere else, that's fine, but you better damn well leave F1 TV alone. That's where it's at.
Yeah, that's what I would be afraid of is with a streaming service taking that over, is because they're going to be like, well, if we're streaming it, then why do we need someone else streaming it? Let's just get rid of F1 TV.
Yeah.
And no, please don't. I quite like being able to watch that with all the details if I want, and no commercials, so we don't have to worry about that. So
yeah, exactly.
Please don't change that.
Yeah. So anyway, that's something that we, for our American audience, we will keep tabs on. Nothing's actually been announced, at least as of yet. There was an article that came out, and there hasn't really been a whole lot of traction since. But we shall see what the fate of the F1 broadcast rights are in the U.S. All right. So before we hop on out and call it a night, we just wanted to give a little bit of predictions. Don't want to do a whole 1 to 10 in the constructors. Don't want to do 20 to 1. That's hard. The honest answer is that's hard. That takes a lot of thought process. But we're going to start with what we think. We're going to start with actually number 3 on the list, then we'll come back to 1 and 2. I'm going to start. What do you think the biggest positive surprise is going to be in 2025?
Man, biggest positive surprise. I don't know. I think at this point, we've even maybe seen a little bit of it in testing. I would say Carlos Sainz at Williams is probably my vote for biggest, a good surprise, because the Williams team wasn't super great last year. They had kind of fallen down from the year before that, and they were struggling just to keep a car on the track the last few races because they were losing all that money trying to put the car back together every week. So the fact that they've come out of testing with Carlos Sainz setting the best time, I think is a really good thing. And I really hope that he makes a good home for himself in that team, because I think he deserved to stay at Ferrari. They just, the one, there's only a couple guys who could have unseated him at Ferrari, and one of them wanted the seat. So it's really too bad for him, because I think he could have continued to succeed there. And who knows, maybe he'll do a Kimi Räikkönen and he'll make his way back there someday. But I am happy to see that he's going into this Williams seat, not just being like, this is it. I don't have to try really hard here. I'm back in the midfield, all that. No, he seems like he really wants to make a difference there. And I'm happy to see that. And I think we're going to be surprised by his performance this year.
Yeah, very good. I agree a lot with pretty much everything you said. I think the biggest positive surprise is going to be Williams, because nobody saw, I sure as heck didn't see that kind of testing form coming from them. The fact, and you mentioned it, I think Carlos Sainz's mental approach is so refreshing, because he could have easily, you would not have faulted him a bit if he didn't want to be the 1-word, 2-word answer guy in an interview, standoffish, going through the motions, doing the thing because nobody else wanted him other than Williams and all that other stuff. But no, he's come into that and has mentally done the mental reset, which I don't know if if you're in that top 4 and you're competing for race wins and now you're not, how you do that as a racing driver when it's kind of just embedded in your DNA to want to go out and try to win, and to now know that probably not. I mean, unless circumstances really, really fall their way, Williams may not even come close to really getting a podium this year. And that's a fair assessment, because those top 4 are definitely clear. But to come in and be positive, and from even just the Abu Dhabi test, the feedback that he was given the team, and the team said, oh, well, we learned things even from that Abu Dhabi test, even though it was one day and it was kind of a donkey car. They learned stuff from it. So I think that's huge. And now you're going to see if Alex Albon can come in a little bit more into his own. And what does that team dynamic look like? And if those two guys are willing to work together and share feedback and share resources, Could be a really, really good year for Williams on a team that desperately, desperately needed some light after a very long and hard 2024. All right. Well, we've seen our biggest surprise. What do we think our biggest disappointment is going to be for 2025?
Oh man, I probably Aston Martin in my mind because of just how far they have fallen over the last couple of seasons. I mean, in 2023, you had Fernando Alonso scoring podiums regularly in the first half of the season and was oftentimes a Max Verstappen retirement away from his first win in, God knows how many years. And it made you really hopeful for its future there. And then in 2023, second half, they slumped. And then 2024, it didn't get any better. And now it looks like it's just, they've pretty much given up on this generation of cars. They're putting everything that they have into the next set of regulations, which I can't really fault them for too much, because anyone who's not really in a position to score big or can go for the win is going to be sinking all of their time and money into the next set of regulations as well. It just stinks to me that it's gotten to that point for them, and that their car looks like it's not even going to be competing in the midfield anymore, that we might not even really see a whole lot of points out of Fernando Alonso, much less, podiums and the like. So I would say that's the reason they're my biggest disappointment.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to agree. I would have expected them to at least hold serve kind of where they were. Yeah, I would have expected them to be in the midfield fight. It doesn't look like, at least early, that they're going to be in that midfield fight. And then if you've got a car that's near the back, you've got this big rule change coming, and you've got Adrian Newey working full, what you would think would be full-time on the 2026 car. What resources are you really going to pour into this? And if you're making that as a business decision, and you're telling 40-plus-year-old Fernando Alonso to wait again, it reeks of the messaging that they had to tell him when he was at McLaren, when just wait for the Honda engine, where you just wait for the Honda engine. When does the ticking time bomb go off? Because he's only got so much patience, and he's mellowed as he's gotten older. And I give Fernando a lot of credit, but he is who he is. And at some point, he's going to lose it, probably on the radio at somebody for something. So I just think from and like you said, from a team that was scoring podiums and was one insane Max Verstappen third sector in Monaco away from getting pole position in Monaco, to now being what all of the experts have dubbed the 9th quickest team coming out of this test. It's kind of shocking. And they are well funded. They are spending at the cap. They have hired people. They've put money into the facility. The new facility is online. And you just got to wonder, is it all about 2026 and they just haven't really cared about this car? Maybe that's the case. Maybe next year we're looking at Aston Martin and said, whoa, who saw that coming? Well, if you looked, everybody. But maybe not. So it was just kind of surprising that they were that far off, I think, to me, at least early. All right. So let's do the constructors first, because I think that's kind of a little more interesting than it's not more interesting. It's as interesting, because I think you could easily see a driver from one team and a constructors somebody else also taking this yet again, like we did last year. So, Cody, I'll pose it to you. Who do you think is going to take the 2025 Constructors Championship?
You're going to be happy to hear that I think it's going to be McLaren, because they seem to be starting off on the right foot. They ended last year on the right foot, and so it's not like any tables have been flipped in the offseason. They look like they are still very strong. Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri are two very talented, young, hungry drivers who are going to see this as their opportunity to gun for the Drivers' Championship as well. So they're going to be pushing it as hard as they can. And while I think it's going to be very tight, I think that McLaren, they got the constructors last year. I think they're going to see this, despite the fact we've got a new regulations coming in 2026, they're going to look at this last season and they're going to say, this is our chance We are in a position to get the double, and we're going to put everything we've got into it. I think they're going to develop the car well into the season, especially if other teams are keeping up with them, and because of that drive to get it this year, I think they're going to, at the very least, get the constructor.
Well, I can't disagree with that. I mean, actually, kind of going into before the test, I would have said I was thinking Ferrari was going to somehow do this because of the strength and experience of their two drivers being there, understanding what the fight is. Yeah, McLaren learned a lot of lessons last year, but they also learned some lessons the really freaking hard way by kind of stubbing their toes. And that's always kind of what I fear of. Like, know who you're racing against, know where your car really is at, have faith in your drivers to execute things, do a double stack if you have to, those types of things, which I think cost them, it definitely cost them in the drivers. And the amazing thing about what they kind of pulled off in the constructors, but even in the races where like Lando would have an off race, Oscar was there. So, or vice versa. If Oscar was having a bad weekend, Lando was near the front. So they had a streak of like 9 or 10 races in a row where they had somebody on the podium. And it's going to take that kind of consistency. And it sure as hell looks like the car, at least to start, is going to be that consistent. So they may not win every race, but they should be in it. And as long as they're not doing anything that I would say that makes me go, what is your decision desk doing, Andrea Stella? I think I think I'm in agreement that they should be, as a team, certainly one to be reckoned with. So I've got them too as the constructors. I think they will try to pull that double because it means something to them. All right, here comes the biggie. Who do we got? Drivers 2025 champion. Expected things or a dark horse coming in and swiping it? What you got?
I'm not sure I could call Max Verstappen a dark horse.
Might be at this stage, though.
I don't know. For the record, my vote for drivers champion is Max Verstappen. And he is, in my opinion, and I think a lot of people's opinion, the best driver in Formula One right now. He is tenacious. He is very driven, very consistent. And he's one of those guys that can take a car that is not the best on the grid and still take it to the podium, take it to race wins, get points out of the worst days. And I think that's what's going to really make the difference here, because he's the defending champion. Like, he wants that next one. He's got the guts and that, I don't know what's the right way to say it. He's got that ruthless. I was going to say call it an intangible factor, but it's what I call the Max factor. He's a guy that, like, it's the same thing like I used to say about betting against Tom Brady in the playoffs, for American football. You better beat him, and you better beat him 6 times over, because I'm still going to bet on Tom Brady 5 times in a row, and then the 6th time, even after I know he's dead, because he's that freaking good, and he just tends to bring it. And the fact that a guy, I mean, those are your transcendental, maybe that's not the right word. Transcendental or something like that. Yeah. Athletes that can elevate to those levels. The question that I have is he close enough to where he can overcome the car? That's kind of the unknown for me, but I think he's definitely in the mix, and he's going to fight like hell for it. I think the races that are going to really make the difference are the off races, because we saw last year that even when the McLaren was far and away the best car of the weekend, that Max was still getting second place.
Yep.
I think we'll see a lot more of that, and I think we'll see a lot more of, even when the Red Bull is worse than that, I think Max is still going to be finishing 4th, 5th, 6th. What I've got the feeling on this is we've seen some of this from Lando before, who I think is going to be the stronger contender from McLaren, is that when he's on, he is on. He's driving away, and he's, he got the best car. He's finishing 20 seconds out in front. When he has a bad weekend, though, it tends to get pretty bad, and I think we might see some of that, especially if the pressure is even stronger than it was last year. Because last year, yeah, he had a big mountain to climb to catch up in the drivers, and so there was the pressure to get that done, but I don't think anyone was really like super confident he was going to get there. With the way they look this year, people are expecting him to win, or at least get right there, and I think that is a lot of pressure, and I think we might see some mistakes out of that. And I think that, combined with the Max factor, is why I've got Max coming out on top for the 5th time in a row.
I want to follow you there, but I have more questions actually about the car, and I think Max is going to ream every ounce of performance that car is going to have. He is going to be ruthless as on track, and I think there will be a drive or two that he's going to have where you just sit back and you just applaud, like the Brazil drive last year. Regardless of whether you're rooting for the guy or you don't like the guy, you have to applaud an effort like that, because I had almost written him off on that weekend, and then the rain came, and then bang, there he was. And I knew we were in trouble on lap 2 when he got 7 positions on the first lap, and I went, well, shit, this is not going to go well today, because he's in that rain zone, and it's like Zen when he's like that, and he's fully capable of doing that. Now, can he wring that type of a performance out all year? I don't know. That's the question I have. Do I have enough faith in Lando to where he can close the show? I don't really know about that either. And I also don't know if Oscar's going to take points off of Lando where it's going to be important, because Oscar's going to be right there. They're going to get no breaks from anybody at Ferrari. They're going to get no breaks from anybody at Mercedes. So if they're having a bad weekend, these other teams are right there to pounce. But I've never had a position where I've had a McLaren driver where I can predict a driver's championship. So why not just go all in and just say, hey, if he thinks it's this year, let's go out and prove it. Like, to me, that's what I want to go see. Go out and prove it. Shut all the naysayers up and just go out and do it. He's got all the tools. There's no excuses this year. The car is as good as it's ever been since he's been there. And if you can't do it in this car, it may not happen for him. So I'm going to predict Lando Norris, but I also have questions. I have questions about. Yeah. So, and that's the thing. Like, there is definitely, at least at this stage, no clear favorite amongst those 4. I think between Max, Lando, Oscar, or 6 really, Max, Lando, Oscar, Charles, Lewis. I still think Mercedes are going to be the ones that kind of peck in and out of there, and they may get a couple race wins, but I don't know that I don't see Kimi Antonelli as being fully championship ready, nor do I see George Russell as being fully championship ready. They're kind of the pouncers on when the guys who pick up the fumble when the other teams screw up. That was kind of their MO last year. And I also still think, because it was so cold in Bahrain, I don't know if they were good because it was cold or they're good because they found something. So that I want to see kind of moving forward as we move into some other places. So I have questions all over the place, but that's the great thing about it. We don't have a clear-cut thing. We'll see. We'll come back. We'll play this tape at the end of the year and see how right or how totally wrong all of us were. But we've got, what is it, next week? We've got our Melbourne official preview. As
it's here, man.
This season is here. It is upon us. So we'll be back next week to lock us in for the Melbourne circuit in Australia. And we're going to kick off this season, and we're going to be on it all year. So, Cody, I'm looking forward to this one. This one's got a chance to be a really special year. So we're going to have a whole lot of fun breaking it all down. So for Cody, again, it's been Andy. And as always, folks, may all your laps be fast.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Outlap F1 podcast. If you like what you heard, click that subscribe button and be sure to leave us a 5-star review. If you want to connect with us outside of the show, check out our website at www.outlapf1.com. Find us on Twitter and Instagram at Outlap F1 Podcast, or email us at chatnow@outlapf1.com. As always, thank you so much for your support, and we'll see you on the next one.